Hey everybody, welcome back to another SUPboarder video. My name is Ruben and I'm going to talk you through the two race boards from the Aztron Inflatable board range, the Meteor Lite and the Meteor, 12.6 and a 14 foot. Going to give you some of the pros and cons between these two boards and hopefully help you decide if these boards are right for you. And also I'm going to give you some basic general information about a 12.6 and 14 foot class race board and help you understand which potential race board size you should be looking at. Little bit of background information about Aztron. Aztron are definitely a well-established brand in the industry when it comes to composite boards and inflatable paddle boards. And not only that, they have a huge range of accessories. They have surf skates, they have balance boards, they have wake skates, they have a lot of stuff in the Aztron brand. And we have been reviewing Aztron products probably for about 3 years now. These boards are brand new for 2022. They did have the Meteor race range in the previous years, but these are new shapes and they've got new features on them, which we'll of course speak about in this video. First off, let's talk about the specifications of these boards. So two boards, two completely different sizes. The Meteor Lite is the smaller board. That is a 12.6 board by 26 inches. The board is 6 inches thick and that brings the volume in at 280 litres. And when we've weighed this board, this weighed 9.13 kilograms and it retails at about 649 GB pounds. So it very much is one of the cheapest race boards on the market. The bigger Meteor is a 14 foot board by 27 inches, so it's a little bit wider and obviously longer. It's still 6 inches thick. That brings the volume in at 318 litres. The weight of this board, when we weighed it, weighed 10.2 kilograms. And the retail price in GB pounds, you're looking at something around £699. So Aztron very much are one of the cheapest price point boards that are available at retailers. And that's actually quite a big thing. Definitely from a customer service point of view, it's much better to go to a physical retailer. So if you're new to racing or you're trying to get into racing, which is probably why you're watching this video, let's answer the first question, which is why is there always a 12.6 and a 14 foot board when it comes to race boards? The simple answer is there's always two classes of race board. There's a 12.6 and a 14 foot. With a 12.6 class, you can ride anything up to 12.6 in length. And with the 14 foot class, you can ride anything up to 14 foot in length. The difference is really started coming back from years ago. 12.6 boards were better to use in swelly or moving or open ocean conditions, and the 14 foot boards were better for flat water and generally faster, longer distance paddling. But nowadays, definitely 14 foot boards are becoming a bit more of the norm, and there are definitely more races around the world that only use 14 foot boards. So straight away, if you are looking to get into racing, a good thing to do is find out where you're going to be racing. With the races that are local to you, what sort of boards do they enter in the class? Do they have a 12.6 class or do they just have a 14 foot class? Because that obviously will influence your buying choice. If you're not looking at these boards for racing, you just want to look at it maybe for fitness paddling, paddling fast, or maybe even a bit of light touring, then obviously it doesn't really matter. And what I'll be speaking about now, the differences of the boards will be more beneficial to you. So you probably got the gist of it then, that a 14 foot board is going to be faster. That's because there is more waterline length of the board on the water, which is going to give you more glide and speed. That is always the case. So if you are wanting to paddle as fast as possible, you're going to be looking at a 14 foot board, or if you're not into racing, you could even go for a longer board that's going to give you even more glide. The other thing that makes a difference to the speed of the board is the width of the board. The 14 foot is a little bit wider at 27 inches and the 12.6 is narrower at 26 inches. So in effect, the 12.6 is going to be slightly quicker with its width overall, but the 14 foot still has that extra length and it is going to give you way more glide. But there definitely are conditions where a 14 foot and a 12.6 will work better in. The 12.6, because it is a shorter board with less length, if you're using it in more open seas, it's going to fit into those swells easier. What I mean by that is, if you imagine the swell pattern out there or the chop out in the ocean or even your bigger open estuaries and lakes, the waves are going up and down. Your 12.6 is more compact, so it's going to be going over or in less of those dips. The 14 foot board is a longer base board, so it's going to be stretched over a bigger wave pattern which generally can make the board a little bit more uncomfortable to use because you have more waves that are trying to push that board around. That's the real basic terms of it and what it feels like when you're on the water. Having said that though, a 14-foot board, if you're into downwinding and you're trying to get as much glide as possible, you will find the 14-foot will be faster again. Unless it's really choppy and big water state, then the 12'6" will just be easier. But most of you who are looking at these boards probably won't be going out in lots of rougher waters because you're very much getting into racing, especially at this cheaper price point. So for that reason, just think about it very clearly as this. If you want to paddle as far as possible, as fast as possible, in moderately flat conditions, you're probably going to be looking at the 14-foot. If you're going to be paddling in lots of different conditions, you maybe live out on the ocean, by the coast, and you sort of paddle in all weathers, probably maybe look towards the 12'6". It's going to give you a little bit more flexibility in different condition states. I know usually the reviews, I do that sort of stuff at the end, but I wanted to bring that in early so you have a good understanding whether a 12'6" or a 14-foot board is the right one for you. Now let's talk about the features that are on these boards and why these boards are different and if these boards are going to be right for you as well. Now, as I said, Aztron did have the Meteors in their previous year's range, but they have completely changed the shapes, the outline shapes, what's on the boards, the materials on the boards, a big old change this year. First thing you'll notice is the outline shape is very different. They're both narrower than they were in the previous years, which is obviously going to help for your speed, and they're a little bit more drawn out, so they're more thinned out in the nose and thinned out in the tail. The nose shape of these boards is actually really quite nice if you are punching into chop. You've got a small amount of rocker there and a very pulled in pointy nose. It does seem to work really well in a lot of different water states. We have just done a full SUPboarder Pro race test with 9 boards and this 14-foot board was in it. So we've had a lot of paddling time on this 14-foot board and the nose shape and the general board did feel quite good in those rougher water conditions. But remember, again, if it's really rough, the 12'6" is going to be a little bit more comfortable. So the tail of the board is more pulled in, and this year they've got a tail release runner at the back there, which is a foam EVA strip, which is stuck on the back of the board. So as the water comes off the tail of the board, it pushes the water away from the rail and stops it wrapping over the back of the board. Getting these in the right place is tricky to get them to work perfectly, but they have got it on there and it definitely does help that release and that overall speed on the board. A big difference this year again is the construction of the board. They managed to bring the weight down a lot on these boards. These are double chamber boards, so you have an internal chamber which you inflate first, and then you have an outer chamber which you then inflate. The maximum pressure is 15 psi on these boards, and the weight of these boards as compared to previous years is about 1.5 kilos on average lighter. So they brought the weight down a lot, which is a really important thing from a race point of view, because if you are trying to paddle quick and get your board up to speed quickly, having a lighter board is going to allow you to have a quicker sprint. They still say it's fused double layer top and bottom material, so it's a thicker based PVC, and you've got that same material onto the rails, and you've got an extra PVC band going around the top which goes over the rail, which gives the board obviously a better bonding layer. They've also got an extra PVC strip in the middle here, which is like an ultra stiff sort of stringer, they say, under the carry handle. The deck pad is completely different, and they've got extra deck pad sort of raised side edges here, which if you had a really wide stance or if you were really tall, you could put your feet right against to give you more of a flatter deck. Extra handles up at the front here. The reason you have extra handles, if you're getting into racing, especially racing where you're going to be running out of the water with your board, and that's why these handles are great, because you can get the board easily and almost drag the board up. Otherwise, they have the central carry handle, which is actually quite a nice, thick, padded carry handle. It nicely stands off from the board, and this 12'6" one is nicely balanced in the middle of the board. Both the boards have D-rings up at the front there, so you can have bungees, you can put a little bit of cargo on there. Most of you for racing probably aren't going to be doing that, but maybe you could look at looking at these boards for a bit of touring. You could put a small dry bag or even take a drink or small packed lunch under the front bungees there. The deck pad is nice and large. You've got a big diamond grip, soft deck pad here overall, going all the way back, and then you've got a different type of deck pad, which is always a really good move at the back of the board. That's what we call the tail kick pad. If you're into step back turns, you're gonna be walking your way back. It's nice to feel the difference in the deck pad if you're barefoot, and when you get to the back, there's a sort of raised EVA slope of foam there, and you can wedge your foot against that to pivot the board around. Looking at the bottom of the board, you can easily see the double chamber there in the middle, and at the back of the board, you've got a single US box fin, which is definitely the fin setup you need to be paddling as fast as possible. You don't want any thruster fins or 3 fins or 2+1 fins. You just need one central fin. The fin that comes with these boards now is much better than the previous Meteors. A 10-inch swept-backed fin is going to give you a good amount of straight line performance because it's nice and swept back, and it's going to give the board a bit more stability because it's quite wide as well. As you rock your board from side to side, the fin actually does give you a bit more stability. Not many people will think about that, but it does make a difference, especially if you're on a narrower board for you. I will say a good thing about that fin box is it's a nice big US box fin box, so if you do want to upgrade and get a better fin, you can fit other fins in that as well. That has got an encapsulated nut, which basically means you just put this in and screw this in place, but you can put other fins in that fin box as well, which is a good move. And lots of other brands, they fit much smaller fin boxes, and I think the previous years Aztrons used to do that, but now with this new one, there's a bigger fin box, so you can get other fins in there as well. Talking about other stuff you get with your package, you don't get a paddle with this. This is very much a race board, and I think that's a good move not having a paddle, because if you're buying into a race board, you've probably already got a paddle, or you're going to be looking at a certain paddle construction or a certain paddle size that's right for your body. You do, however, get a standard nice Aztron leash. I've always said these are one of the best leashes that come with pretty much all the boards out there really. Quite funky, nice big Velcro, easy to put it around your calf or your ankle. A nice coiled leash that's going to stay off the back of your board when you're paddling as fast as possible, and it easily goes on the D-ring at the back of the board. And another nice little thing, always a nice touch, Aztron, with their D-rings, they have a sort of stainless tube inside the D-ring, which is another little thing that's showing they're trying to get a bit more quality fittings on their boards. Most of them just have PVC wrapped over and the D-ring around that. And if you look closely, you'll see this bit of stainless tube inside the D-ring, which is going to make it much more hard wearing, and it's less likely to pull the actual D-ring out. The pump you get with this is the same pump you get with all of the Aztron boards. It's a two-way pump, so it pumps on the upstroke and on the downstroke. And then when the pumpings get hard, you just take this red nozzle out, and then it will just pump on the downstroke, and it will make your arms fatigue less when you're pulling up with the pump. This pump can easily pump the amount of pressure that needs to go into these boards at 15 psi. I think this pump can go up to about 26 psi, so it isn't going to have a problem there. It's not the biggest of pumps, and obviously if you're looking at the 14-foot board, you're going to be getting a lot of air into this board, and it is going to take a little bit longer than those double chambered pumps you get with some other brands. But it does the job, it's an adequate pump, and it's the sort of pump you'd expect to see at the price point. The bag you get with the Aztron Meteor packages is a fairly basic bag. There's not much padding, if anything at all. You get a small bit around the shoulder straps. It's nice and big, so it's easy to get the boards in, which is good. If you're going to be carrying it longer distances, well, you probably wouldn't be taking that bag, or you'd be padding that bag out with a lot of towels. It's probably the sort of price point bag we'd expect to see at the price point, and other rival brands have similar bags at that price point as well. When we put the Meteors into our SUPboarder deflection test, which is what we do with all our iSUPs, which is where we measure how bendy the board is, we put it on a gap of 1.5 meters apart, and we put a weight of 75 kilograms on top of the board, and then we measure how much the board bends. The board was pumped up to 15 psi, and it dropped 12 millimeters. A real top deflection would be around 7 or 8, and a super flexi deflection would be around 19. So it's sitting nicely in the middle. As far as paddling these boards on the water for stability and maybe what rider weight should be looking at what board, you're going to find if you paddle these back to back, the 12.6 is a lot more unstable than the 14-foot. And yes, the 12.6 is narrower, but really it's to do with how the board is obviously shorter, but the nose is more pulled in closer to your feet. In effect, the 14-foot has the same nose shape, but it's further away from you. So when you rock from side to side, you've got less shoulder width up here just in front of your feet on the 12'6". So the 14 foot is considerably more stable than the 12'6". Yes, it is a wider board, but it feels more stable than an inch wider. It feels more like 3 inches wider. So you've got a lot more stability with the 14 foot. So if you are a heavier rider up to about 110 kilos, you could be getting onto the 14 foot if you're a moderate ability of rider. Obviously, if you're a really good racer and you're good at standing on small boards, you could probably get onto this board up to 125 kilos, but we're talking averagely here. A lot of people get these comments on YouTube. They're like, oh, I could ride this, I'm this weight. Well, it's all an average overall. The 12'6" board, definitely sweet spot up to about 95 kilos, I think, with this board. Yeah, you could be heavier again, but you're gonna have to be a little bit more skilled. Definitely if you're sub 85 kilos, you could probably get on this if you're an average paddler and quite easily paddle it and get some good speed out of it. Let me give you some cons and observations of the Aztron Meteor range of boards. There's a few things that they've done this year that are good, but also don't make any massive difference to the rider experience. One of the things is these extra raised EVA pads on the side of the deck here. They look really good and they are neat on the board, and definitely race boards in general have this sort of thing, but at these board widths we didn't find it really needed them at all, because you're stood inside of these pads and you never actually need them. If these were on maybe a 25 wide board or a 24-inch wide board, then yes, they would be needed, but even a heavier rider, when they get on these boards, they're not really needed. And they do seem to get in the way with the 14 foot board, not so much the 12'6". When you're paddling, you're bringing your paddle down the side of the rail and they can catch on the side pads here. The handle was centrally balanced on the 12'6" board, but it wasn't on the 14 foot board. And the general finish of the boards, the 12'6" is finished much better than the 14 foot. This could be to do that the 14 foot was an early sample and this 12'6" is a production board. So the finish on this one is better, but there are still slight glue marks, start areas where the glue is peeling up, or you might need to reapply that glue later on. There's no big problems with this board. So this board's been pumped up for over a week now. It's still the same pressure. There's no sort of delamination or any glue here, but maybe the deck pad and areas could do with a little bit extra glue. It's a small thing, and it's also a compromise when you go to buy a cheaper price point board. And again, the packaging is one of the big standout negatives from us. Everything is still wrapped in way too much plastic. Aztron, please, we want to see that change for next year. And I touched on it earlier about the tail edge. Not sure that's 100% in the best place for the optimum performance of the board. I think it's great that it's on there, but maybe it could do with a bit of R&D to work out where that would be best placed into the future. But giving you a load of pros to the board, there is quite a few pros to this range of boards. For start, this is a very light range of boards, and it is a double chamber range of boards. The outline shape of the boards is pretty good, and we do think the nose itself is fairly well refined, and it works in a lot of different water conditions. A nice little bit of rocker there to stop the board from nosediving, and it's got this small pulled nose. If you do penetrate any waves, it doesn't really slow you down when you're punching into chop. In summary, it's been really good to get on these two boards, and it's been really good also to see a proper 12'6" production board against this 14 foot sample board. But the designs are good, the shapes are nice, and the boards paddle well. You're going to get a good amount of glide, the 12'6" and the 14, but if you want to paddle as fast as possible, you're going to be looking at the longer 14 foot. Still a good amount of stability with the 14 foot, and the 12'6" will work better in more open water and really rough conditions. Definitely some of the lightest and cheapest price point race boards on the market that you can find at a retailer. If you're interested in these boards, I really hope this video has helped guide you to what size will be best for you. Definitely if you can get to a local retailer and see one of these boards, or possibly even go on one of these boards before you buy, that's always the best option. If you've got these boards or ridden these boards, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Get them in the comments below. But until next time, we'll see you on another SUPboarder or SUPboarder Pro video really soon.